The alien scout vessel moved silently through the darkness of space, its sleek metallic surface reflecting faint glimmers of distant stars. It was a small ship, designed for speed and stealth rather than combat. Inside, Captain Vorak stood at the helm, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic displays that floated before him. The screens showed endless streams of data, energy readings, gravitational anomalies, and other traces of activity in the vast emptiness of the cosmos. For days, they had been traveling along the edge of their empire's territory, searching for signs of anything unusual, and now something unusual had appeared. A faint signal echoed across the sensors, barely noticeable against the background noise of the universe. It was weak, almost like static, but there was no mistaking it. This was not natural. Someone or something was out there. Vorak leaned forward, his fingers tapping rapidly on the control panel as he isolated the source of the disturbance. The readings were coming from a nearby star system, one that had never shown any sign of intelligent life before. His crew looked up from their stations, exchanging nervous glances. None of them spoke, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Vorak turned to his second-in-command, a tall alien named Rinks, who stood by the navigation console. "What do you make of this?" he asked, his voice low and measured. Rinks hesitated for a moment, studying the data carefully. "It's artificial," she said finally, "but primitive. The energy signature is crude compared to ours. Primitive or not, the presence of another civilization meant one thing: potential danger. Vorak knew the rules of their mission. Any unknown species capable of producing such signals needed to be investigated, and if necessary, neutralized. He gave the order to change course, directing the ship toward the mysterious signal. As they approached, the crew worked quickly to gather more information. They launched probes to scan the area, hoping to learn more about whoever or whatever they were dealing with. Far away, on the other side of the same star system, Lieutenant Rachel Dawson paced back and forth across the bridge of the human Warship Pioneer Dawn. She wasn't used to feeling uneasy, but today was different. Something about this mission felt off. Her orders had been clear enough: investigate strange readings near the outer rim of explored space. But the closer they got to their destination, the stranger things became. The ship's sensors had picked up fluctuations in energy patterns, similar to what might happen during a solar flare. But these weren't random bursts. They were deliberate, almost rhythmic. Rachel stopped pacing and glanced over at Ensign Kyle Bennett, who sat hunched over his station. Kyle was young, barely out of training, but he had a knack for interpreting sensor data. Right now, though, even he seemed confused. "Anything new?" Rachel asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Kyle shook his head without looking up. "Still analyzing, Lieutenant. Whatever it is, it's definitely not natural. Could be some kind of malfunctioning satellite, maybe debris from an old probe. But I don't think so." Rachel frowned. Debris didn't move like this. And satellites didn't emit pulses of energy in repeating patterns. No, something else was out there. Something alive. She walked over to the main view screen and stared out at the endless void ahead. Somewhere out there, hidden among the stars, was an answer waiting to be found. But would finding it bring peace or trouble? Back aboard the alien scout vessel, the mood grew darker. The closer they came to the source of the signal, the clearer it became that this was no ordinary discovery. Their sensors revealed a massive object moving through space, a ship, larger than anything they had expected. Its design was unlike anything in their database. Blocky and angular, it lacked the elegance of Zixarian engineering, yet there was no denying its purpose. This was a warship. Captain Vorak clenched his jaw tightly. Whoever these beings were, they clearly possessed technology advanced enough to build spacecraft capable of interstellar travel. That alone made them a threat. He ordered his crew to prepare for battle. Weapon systems powered up, shields hummed to life, and targeting arrays locked onto the unknown vessel. Still, caution lingered in the back of his mind. If this race was truly as primitive as Rinks believed, why did their ship look so heavily armed? What secrets were they hiding? On the Pioneer Dawn, Alarms began to blare suddenly, snapping everyone out of their thoughts. Kyle spun around in his seat, wide-eyed. "We've got company," he shouted. "There's another ship closing in fast." Rachel rushed to the tactical display where a red dot blinked ominously on the screen. "Identify," she commanded sharply. "It's not one of ours," Kyle replied, his voice trembling slightly. "And it's big. Bigger than us." Rachel took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "Raise shields. Divert power to weapons systems." Turning to Chief Engineer Daniel Harper, who stood nearby, she added, "Make sure everything is ready. We may have to fight." Daniel nodded grimly and hurried off the bridge, barking orders into his communicator. Meanwhile, Rachel turned her attention back to the view screen. In the distance, a shadow loomed against the backdrop of stars. It was the alien ship, growing larger with each passing second. Its shape was sleek and menacing, radiating an aura of menace that sent chills down her spine. For a few tense moments, neither side moved. Both ships hovered in the cold silence of space, locked in a deadly standoff. Then, without warning, beams of light shot out from the alien vessel, cutting through the vacuum like knives. The Pioneer Dawn rocked violently as the first volley struck its shields, sending sparks flying across the bridge. Rachel grabbed hold of the railing to steady herself. "Return fire," she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't. Let them get another shot off." Turrets swiveled into position along the hull of the human warship, unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts. To everyone's surprise, several shots connected, striking the alien ship squarely in its flank. Sparks erupted from the enemy vessel as parts of its armor plating melted away under the intense heat. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Rachel silenced them with a sharp glance. This wasn't over yet. Inside the alien ship, confusion reigned supreme. Captain Vorak stared in disbelief at the damage reports flooding in from every corner of his vessel. How could these primitives hit them? Their weapons should have been laughably ineffective against Zixarian shielding. Yet here they were, taking hits and struggling to respond. Anger flared within him, burning away the last traces of doubt. These humans, assuming that's what they were, would pay dearly for their insolence. As the two ships exchanged fire, the battle raged on, lighting up the darkness of space with flashes of brilliant color. Neither side was willing to back down, each determined to prove their dominance. But amidst the chaos, a single thought lingered in Rachel's mind. Why had the aliens attacked without provocation? What had driven them to violence so quickly? There had been no attempt at communication, no effort to understand who they were facing. It was as if the aliens saw humanity as nothing more than a threat to be eliminated. And perhaps, Rachel realized, that was exactly how they viewed them. The battle between the two ships raged on, each side exchanging blows with increasing ferocity. The alien vessel, sleek and menacing, fired another volley of energy beams, narrowly missing the Pioneer Dawn, as it twisted and turned in a desperate attempt to evade. On the bridge of the human warship, Lieutenant Rachel Dawson gripped the railing tightly, her knuckles white from the strain. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she shouted orders to her crew, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. "Kyle, keep scanning their movements. Daniel, I need more power to the shields," Rachel barked, her eyes darting between the tactical display and the main view screen. The enemy ship loomed large now, its weapons glowing ominously as it prepared for another attack. Ensign Kyle Bennett worked frantically at his station, trying to make sense of the data flooding his screens. "Their targeting systems are locking onto our engines," he reported, his voice rising in alarm. "If they hit us there, we're done for." Rachel clenched her jaw. She couldn't afford to let panic take hold. Not now. "Divert auxiliary power to the rear shields," she ordered, "and get me a firing solution on their weapon arrays. If we can disable those, we might have a chance." Chief Engineer Daniel Harper rushed back onto the bridge, his face flushed from exertion. "Shields are holding for now, but we're pushing the reactors to their limits. One more direct hit and we'll lose them entirely." Rachel nodded grimly. "Then we'd better not take another hit." Turning to Lieutenant Commander Lucas Grant, who manned the weapons console, she added, "Lucas, when you see an opening, take it. We don't have time to waste." Lucas gave a sharp nod. his fingers flying over the controls as he lined up the ship's turrets. The Pioneer Dawn shuddered violently as another blast from the alien ship struck its shields, sending sparks cascading across the bridge. Alarms blared and several crew members stumbled, but no one stopped working. They were too focused, too determined to survive. Finally, Lucas spotted his opportunity. "Got it!" he exclaimed, his voice cutting through the noise. "Firing!" A barrage of plasma bolts erupted from the Pioneer Dawn, streaking toward the alien vessel like fiery darts. To everyone's amazement, several shots connected, striking the enemy ship's weapon arrays with devastating precision. Explosions rippled across its surface, and one of its turrets fell silent, smoking and sparking. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Rachel silenced them with a sharp wave of her hand. "Stay focused," she warned. "They're still dangerous. Don't let your guard down." Inside the alien ship, Captain Vorak stared in disbelief at the damage reports streaming in from every corner of his vessel. His crew scrambled to repair the damaged systems, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. For the first time in his long career, Vorak felt a flicker of doubt. These humans, primitive, crude, insignificant, had somehow managed to outmaneuver and outgun his advanced warship. How was this possible? "Status report," he demanded, his voice sharp and commanding. Rink stepped forward, her expression grim. "Weapon Array 3 is offline. Shields are down to 60%. Hull integrity is compromised in multiple sections." Vorak growled under his breath, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. He had underestimated these humans, and now they were paying the price for his arrogance, but he refused to admit defeat. Not yet. There was still time to turn the tide of the battle in their favor. "Redirect all available power to the remaining weapons," he ordered. "And prepare the plasma cannons for a concentrated strike. We'll target their bridge. If we can eliminate their command structure, the rest of the ship will fall into disarray." Rinks hesitated for a moment, clearly uneasy about the order. "Sir, that could result in significant casualties among their crew. Are you sure?" "Do it," Vorak snapped, cutting her off. "We cannot afford to show weakness. This species must be dealt with decisively." As the alien crew scrambled to carry out his orders, Vorak leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had always believed the Zixarians were superior to any other race in the galaxy. Their technology, their culture, their very way of life set them apart. Yet here they were, struggling to hold their own against what should have been an inferior opponent. It was infuriating and humbling. Back aboard the Pioneer Dawn, Rachel noticed a sudden shift in the alien ship's behavior. Its movements became more erratic, less predictable. Something was changing. "Kyle, what's going on?" she asked, her eyes narrowing as she studied the tactical display. "They're powering up something big," Kyle replied, his tone urgent. "It looks like they're preparing for a massive attack. If they hit us with that, even our reinforced shields won't hold." Rachel's heart sank. She knew they couldn't withstand another assault like the last one. They needed a plan, a way to end this fight before it ended them. Her gaze shifted to Lucas, who was already thinking ahead. "Lieutenant," Lucas said, turning to face her, "if we overload their power core with focused EMP bursts, we might be able to cripple their systems without destroying them outright. It's risky, but it could work." Rachel considered the idea for why. A moment. An EMP burst carried its own risks. It could destabilize the alien ship's reactor, potentially causing a catastrophic explosion. But if it succeeded, it would neutralize the threat without resorting to outright destruction. And maybe, just maybe, it would give them a chance to open a dialogue. "Do it," she said finally. "But make sure we're ready to jump to warp if things go south. I don't want to be caught in the blast radius." Lucas nodded and began inputting commands into the weapon system. Meanwhile, Kyle worked feverishly to decode fragments of the alien language intercepted during the battle. "I think I've got something," he said after several tense minutes. "Their communication protocols are complex, but I can send basic messages using pre-recorded audio clips. Maybe we can signal our intent to surrender or negotiate." Rachel hesitated. Negotiating with an enemy mid-battle was risky, especially when they had shown no interest in talking so far. But if there was even a small chance of avoiding further bloodshed, she had to take it. "Prepare the message," she instructed. "Send it as soon as Lucas fires the EMP." The seconds ticked by agonizingly slowly as the Pioneer Dawn positioned itself for the final gambit. The alien ship loomed larger than ever on the view screen, its weapons glowing brighter as it charged up for its own attack. Rachel held her breath, her hands gripping the railing so tightly her fingers ached. "EMP ready," Lucas announced, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Fire," Rachel said simply. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the Pioneer Dawn, followed by a pulse of electromagnetic energy that surged toward the alien vessel. The effect was immediate. Lights flickered and died across the enemy ship's hull, and its weapons went dark. Sparks flew inside its interior as critical systems failed, plunging the crew into chaos. At the same time, Kyle transmitted the pre-recorded message, hoping against hope that the aliens would understand. "This is Lieutenant Rachel Dawson of the United Earth Fleet. We do not seek conflict. Stand down and let us talk." For a moment there was silence. Then, slowly, the alien ship began to drift, its engines sputtering as it struggled to regain control. On the bridge of the Pioneer Dawn, the crew exchanged wary glances. Had it worked? Or were they about to face another attack? Rachel straightened, her resolve hardening. Whatever happened next, they had done everything they could to avoid unnecessary violence. Now it was up to the aliens to decide whether to escalate or stand down. Inside the crippled alien ship, Captain Vorak sat in stunned silence as his crew fought to stabilize the failing systems. The humans had outwitted him again, using tactics he hadn't anticipated. Worse still, their message of peace had reached him loud and clear. For the first time in his life, Vorak found himself questioning the righteousness of his mission. Was this truly the best course of action? Or had his pride blinded him to the possibility of coexistence? He glanced at Rinks, who stood nearby, her expression unreadable. "What do you suggest?" he asked quietly. She met his gaze evenly. "Perhaps it's time to listen," she said simply. Vorak sighed, knowing she was right. Whether he liked it or not, the humans had proven themselves worthy adversaries and perhaps allies. Reluctantly, he gave the order to stand down. The alien ship drifted silently now, its once menacing form reduced to a hulking shadow against the endless backdrop of stars. Inside the Pioneer Dawn, the tension on the bridge began to ease, though no one dared let their guard down completely. Lieutenant Rachel Dawson stood at the center of the room, her sharp eyes scanning the tactical display for any sign of movement from the enemy vessel. So far, it remained still, its weapons dark and its engines sputtering weakly. "Status update," Rachel said, her voice calm but firm as she turned to Ensign Kyle Bennett. Kyle glanced up from his console, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. "Their power systems are still offline. Shields are down completely. They're not in any position to fight back." Rachel nodded, though her expression remained guarded. Victory wasn't something she could afford to celebrate just yet. The aliens had shown themselves to be unpredictable, and even a crippled opponent could pose a threat if provoked. She turned to Chief Engineer Daniel Harper, who was monitoring the ship's systems. "How are we holding up?" Daniel wiped sweat from his brow and straightened. "Shields are at 40%, but everything else is stable. We took some damage to the hull, but nothing critical. Repairs can wait until this situation is resolved." Rachel exhaled slowly, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. The crew had performed admirably under pressure, but the real challenge lay ahead. Now that the immediate danger had passed, they needed to figure out what came next. Did the aliens truly intend to stand down, or were they simply buying time to regroup? And if they were willing to talk, how could humanity ensure that this encounter didn't escalate into something worse? "Lieutenant," Kyle spoke up again, breaking her train of thought. "I've been analyzing their language patterns. I think I can piece together enough to establish basic communication, but it's going to take time and patience." Rachel nodded. "Do what you can. If we can open a dialogue, we might be able to avoid further conflict." Turning to Lieutenant Commander Lucas Grant, she added, "Keep the weapons online, but don't make any aggressive moves unless absolutely necessary. We need to show them we're serious about peace, but ready to defend ourselves if needed." Lucas gave a curt nod and returned to his station, keeping a watchful eye on the alien ship. Meanwhile, Kyle dove deeper into his work, poring over the intercepted signals and fragments of data he had collected during the battle. It was slow, painstaking work, but he refused to give up. Every word he decoded brought them one step closer to understanding their mysterious adversaries. Inside the alien vessel, Captain Vorak sat in silence, his mind racing as he weighed his options. The humans had proven themselves to be resourceful, clever, and, most troubling of all, willing to extend an olive branch despite the violence that had transpired. Their message of peace replayed in his thoughts, its tone measured and deliberate. It was clear they wanted to negotiate, but Vorak couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that this might be a trap. Rinks approached him cautiously, sensing his hesitation. "Sir, we can't afford to delay much longer. Our systems are failing, and the reactor is unstable. If we don't act soon, we risk losing the ship entirely." Vorak clenched his jaw, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He hated being in this position, outmatched, outmaneuvered, and forced to rely on the mercy of an unknown species. Yet Rinks was right. Pride wouldn't keep them alive. Reluctantly, he made his decision. "Send a response," he ordered. "Tell them we're willing to talk, but only if they lower their weapons first." Rinks hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Understood, sir." She moved to carry out the order, her movements precise and efficient. As she worked, Vorak stared out at the human warship through the viewport. Its blocky design seemed crude compared to the sleek lines of Zixarian vessels, yet there was no denying the raw power it possessed. These humans were different from anything he had encountered before, and that unsettled him deeply. Back aboard the Pioneer Dawn, Kyle suddenly perked, up his eyes widening as new data appeared on his screen. "They're responding!" he exclaimed, drawing the attention of everyone on the bridge. Rachel stepped closer, her heart pounding with anticipation. "What does it say?" Kyle worked quickly to translate the message, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's cautious. They're willing to talk, but they want us to stand down first. They're asking for proof of our intentions." Rachel considered the request for a moment. Lowering their weapons would leave them vulnerable, but refusing could reignite hostilities. Trust had to start somewhere. "Tell them we'll comply, but only after they do the same. We'll meet halfway." Kyle relayed the message, and for several tense minutes there was no response. The alien ship remained motionless, its battered frame casting long shadows across the void. Finally, a reply came through. "They agree," Kyle announced, relief evident in his voice. "They're powering down their remaining systems." Rachel nodded, satisfied. "Good. Lucas, disable the main cannons, but keep the point defense turrets active, just in case." As the two ships disarmed, a fragile sense of calm settled over the battlefield. For the first time since the encounter began, neither side seemed poised to strike. Instead, both crews focused on establishing communication, each trying to decipher the other's language and intent. On the alien ship, Captain Vorak watched as his crew worked tirelessly to stabilize the damaged systems. His pride stung, but he knew survival took precedence over ego. He signaled for Rinks to join him at the communications console. Together, they prepared to speak directly with the humans, using the limited vocabulary they had pieced together from the earlier messages. Meanwhile, Rachel assembled a small team to handle the negotiations. She chose Kyle, whose expertise in decoding languages made him invaluable, and Lucas, whose tactical knowledge ensured they wouldn't be caught off guard. Daniel also volunteered to assist, offering technical support in case the aliens attempted to exploit their systems during the exchange. When the video feed finally connected, the bridge of the Pioneer Dawn fell silent. On the view screen, the faces of two aliens appeared, Vorak and Rinks. Their features were sharp and angular, their skin a pale grayish hue. Their eyes glowed faintly, adding an eerie quality to their appearance. Despite their intimidating looks, their expressions were neutral, almost wary. Rachel stepped forward, standing tall as she addressed them. "I am Lieutenant Rachel Dawson of the United Earth Fleet. We mean you no harm, but we will defend ourselves if provoked. Let's find a way to resolve this peacefully." Vorak studied her for a moment, his glowing eyes narrowing slightly. Then, in halting, broken English, he replied, "I am Vorak, leader of this vessel. Your actions, unexpected. Explain yourselves." Rachel nodded, unsurprised by the mistrust in his tone. She gestured for Kyle to step forward. "We detected your presence in this region of space and came to investigate. When you attacked without warning, we acted in self-defense. Now we seek to understand why this happened." Vorak exchanged a glance with Rinks, who whispered something in their native tongue. After a pause, Vorak responded, "Your kind, unknown, to us. A threat. We acted to protect ourselves." Rachel shook her head firmly. "We are explorers, not conquerors. This was a misunderstanding, one that nearly cost lives. Moving forward, we must learn to coexist. There's enough room in the galaxy for both of us." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For a long moment, Vorak said nothing, his gaze fixed on Rachel as if searching for deception. Finally, he spoke. "Coexistence, possible, but trust must be earned." Rachel inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the challenge ahead. "Agreed. Let's begin by sharing information. What brings you here? Why did you attack us?" Vorak hesitated clearly, reluctant to reveal too much. But Rinks placed a hand on his shoulder, urging him to continue. With a resigned sigh, he explained, "We patrol borders of our empire, seek out threats. You entered our space. We assumed hostility." Rachel processed the information carefully. It seemed the aliens operated under a policy of preemptive strikes, eliminating potential dangers before they could grow. While understandable from their perspective, it was a dangerous mindset, one that could easily lead to unnecessary conflict. "We weren't aware this was your territory," Rachel said diplomatically. "Had we known, we would have approached differently. In the future, perhaps we can establish clear boundaries to prevent similar incidents." Vorak nodded slowly, though skepticism lingered in his expression. "Boundaries, acceptable, but violations will not be tolerated." "Understood," Rachel replied, "and we expect the same from you. Humanity values peace, but we won't tolerate aggression without cause." The conversation continued for some time, each side probing for weaknesses while cautiously revealing bits of information. Though progress was slow, it was undeniable. By the end of the exchange, both parties had agreed to part ways peacefully, with promises to share coordinates and avoid further confrontations. As the transmission ended, Rachel turned to her crew, exhaustion etched on her face. "Well done," she said simply. "Today we proved that even in the face of fear and misunderstanding, cooperation is possible." The crew murmured in agreement, though none of them were naive enough to believe this marked the end of humanity's challenges in the galaxy. Still, it was a start, a small but significant step toward building bridges instead of walls. The Pioneer Dawn drifted quietly through the star system, its engines humming softly as it prepared to leave the area. The alien ship, now stabilized but still damaged, began to move slowly in the opposite direction. Both vessels had agreed to part ways, but the encounter left a lasting impression on everyone involved. For Lieutenant Rachel Dawson and her crew, it was a reminder of how fragile humanity's place in the galaxy truly was. For Captain Vorak and his people, it was a lesson in humility, and a glimpse into the complexities of interacting with an unfamiliar species. On the bridge of the Pioneer Dawn, Rachel stood by the main view screen, watching as the alien ship grew smaller and smaller in the distance. She felt a mix of emotions: relief that the confrontation had ended peacefully, pride in her crew's performance, and a lingering sense of unease. This encounter had been unlike anything she'd ever experienced. It wasn't just about winning, or losing. It was about understanding. And while they had managed to avoid outright war, Rachel knew this was only the beginning of a much larger story. "Kyle," she said, turning to Ensign Kyle Bennett, who was still seated at his station, "how much of their language did you manage to decode?" Kyle looked up, his expression thoughtful. "Enough to get by for basic communication, but there's still a lot we don't know. Their syntax is incredibly complex, and some of their concepts don't translate well into human terms. But I've saved all the data we collected. With more time, I think we can build a better understanding." Rachel nodded. "Good work. Keep analyzing it. We might need it again someday." Turning to Chief Engineer Daniel Harper, she added, "How are repairs coming along?" Daniel wiped his hands on a cloth and straightened. "We're making progress. The hull breaches aren't too severe, and the shields should be back online within the hour. We'll need a full maintenance check once we return to base, though." "Understood," Rachel replied. "Once we're clear of this region, set a course for Earth. We have a lot to report." As the crew went about their tasks, Rachel allowed herself a moment to reflect. The battle had been intense, and the negotiations tense. But what struck her most was the realization that humanity wasn't alone in the universe. These aliens, these Zixarians, were advanced, disciplined, and clearly capable of great destruction. Yet they had also shown a willingness to listen, even if reluctantly. That gave Rachel hope. If two such different species could find common ground after a violent first meeting, perhaps there was a chance for peace in the wider galaxy. Meanwhile, aboard the alien ship, Captain Vorak sat alone in his quarters, staring at the wall. His mind replayed the events of the past hours over and over again, each memory bringing fresh waves of frustration and doubt. He had always believed in the superiority of the Zixarian race, their technology, their culture, their way of life. But today, those beliefs had been shaken. The humans had outsmarted him, outmaneuvered him, and forced him into a position where retreat was the only viable option. It was humiliating, but it was also enlightening. Rinks entered the room quietly, sensing her captain's troubled thoughts. "Sir," she said gently, "the crew has finished stabilizing the reactor. We're ready to jump to warp whenever you give the order." Vorak nodded absently, not looking up. "Good. Set a course for home. I'll join you on the bridge shortly." Rinks hesitated, unsure whether to say more. Finally, she spoke. "You did the right thing, sir. Staying and fighting would have accomplished nothing. This experience has given us valuable insight into another species. Perhaps it will help us avoid similar conflicts in the future." Vorak sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging slightly. "Insight comes at a cost, Rinks. Our pride may never recover from this. But you're right. We learned something today. Humanity is not to be underestimated. They are clever, resourceful, and determined. If we cross paths again, we must tread carefully." Rinks nodded in agreement. "And perhaps next time we can approach them differently, without weapons drawn." Vorak didn't respond immediately. Instead, he rose from his seat and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. For centuries, the Zixarians had expanded, their empire through strength and dominance, crushing any resistance they encountered. But today, they had faced an opponent who refused to be crushed, an opponent who sought dialogue instead of destruction. It was a new kind of challenge, one that required a new kind of thinking. "Prepare a full report for the Council," Vorak said finally. "Include everything. Our initial assumptions, the battle, the negotiations, and our conclusions. They need to understand what happened here, and they need to know that humanity is not a threat to be dismissed lightly." "Yes, sir," Rinks replied, bowing slightly before leaving the room. As the alien ship jumped to warp, disappearing into the vastness of space, the Pioneer Dawn did the same, heading in the opposite direction. Both crews carried with them the weight of what they had experienced, a shared history that neither side could ignore. Back on Earth, news of the encounter spread quickly through military channels. The United Earth Fleet convened an emergency meeting to discuss the implications of the event. Admiral Gregory Hayes, a grizzled veteran with decades of service behind him, presided over the gathering. His sharp eyes scanned the room as he addressed the assembled officers. "This changes everything," he said bluntly. "For the first time, we've made contact with an intelligent extraterrestrial species, and it didn't go smoothly. While Lieutenant Dawson and her crew handled themselves admirably, we cannot afford to be complacent. We must prepare for the possibility of further encounters, whether peaceful or hostile." Lieutenant Rachel Dawson stood at the front of the room, flanked by her senior staff. As she recounted the details of the mission, her voice remained steady and professional, though her eyes betrayed the gravity of the situation. When she finished speaking, the room erupted into murmurs of concern and speculation. Admiral Hayes raised a hand to silence the chatter. This incident highlights two critical issues. First, we lack the tools to effectively communicate with alien species. Second, our defenses are inadequate against advanced technology. Both of these weaknesses must be addressed immediately. He turned to Rachel. "Lieutenant, your crew's actions have given us a rare opportunity to learn from this experience. Work with our linguists to refine the translation algorithms based on the data you collected, and coordinate with engineering teams to analyze the alien weapons systems. We need to close the gap between us and them." Rachel saluted crisply. "Yes, sir." The meeting continued late into the night, with plans being drawn up for enhanced training, programs, improved diplomatic protocols, and accelerated research into alien technologies. By the time it adjourned, everyone present understood that humanity had reached a pivotal moment in its history. The galaxy was no longer an empty void waiting to be explored. It was a crowded, unpredictable place filled with dangers and opportunities alike. Weeks later, as the Pioneer Dawn underwent repairs at a sprawling orbital dry dock, Rachel found herself standing on an observation deck, gazing out at the Earth below. The planet looked serene from this distance, its blue oceans and swirling clouds masking the complexity of life beneath. She thought about the aliens, their strange faces, their glowing eyes, their cautious words, and wondered what the future held for both races. Daniel joined her after a while, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Rachel and leaned against the railing beside her. "Thinking about them?" he asked, nodding toward the stars. Rachel took a sip of the hot liquid and smiled faintly. "Yeah, about them, about us, about everything. Today proved that we're not ready for what's out there. Not yet. But maybe someday we will be." Daniel chuckled softly. "One step at a time, Lieutenant. Today was a good start." Rachel nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Humanity had taken its first tentative steps into the galactic stage, and while the road ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, she knew they couldn't turn back now. The universe was vast, mysterious, and full of possibilities, and somewhere out there other eyes watched silently, waiting to see what the future held for these unlikely survivors. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the observation deck, Rachel felt a spark of determination ignite within her. Whatever came next, humanity would face it together, with courage, curiosity, and an unshakable belief in the power of understanding. The days following the encounter with the alien ship passed quickly for Lieutenant Rachel Dawson and her crew. The Pioneer Dawn had returned to Earth, docking at a sprawling orbital station where engineers swarmed over its battered hull, repairing the damage inflicted during the battle. Inside the ship, the mood was a mixture of relief and anticipation. The crew knew they had achieved something extraordinary, not just surviving their first contact with an alien species, but also establishing a fragile line of communication. Yet no one could shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Rachel spent much of her time in meetings with military leaders, scientists, and linguists, sharing every detail of the encounter. Her reports were thorough, covering everything from the initial sensor readings to the tense negotiations that followed the battle. She emphasized the importance of learning from the experience, not just in terms of technology, but also in understanding how to approach other intelligent species. The aliens, these Zixarians, had been aggressive at first, but they had also shown a willingness to listen when faced with reason. That, Rachel argued, was a lesson worth remembering. Admiral Gregory. Hayes listened intently as Rachel spoke, his weathered face betraying little emotion. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers thoughtfully. "You've done well, Lieutenant," he said finally. "But we can't rely on luck or quick thinking next time. We need to be prepared, for anything." Rachel nodded. "Yes, sir. I believe our priority should be improving our ability to communicate. If we'd been able to establish contact earlier, perhaps the situation wouldn't have escalated so quickly." Hayes agreed. "Linguistics teams are already working on decoding more of the alien language using the data you provided. But communication is only part of the equation. Their weapons nearly overwhelmed us. Our defenses need significant upgrades if we're going to stand a chance against similar threats in the future." Rachel glanced at Chief Engineer Daniel Harper, who sat nearby. He had been presenting detailed analyses of the alien weaponry, explaining how their energy beams operated, on frequencies far beyond what human technology could currently produce. "We're studying the samples we managed to capture during the fight," Daniel added. "If we can replicate even a fraction of their technology, it could give us a critical edge." The Admiral nodded approvingly. "Good. Make it happen. And Lieutenant," he said, turning back to Rachel, "I want your crew ready for another mission. You've proven yourselves capable of handling unexpected challenges. That makes you valuable assets as we move forward." Rachel straightened, her expression resolute. "Understood, sir. We'll be ready." Meanwhile, aboard the Zixarian vessel, Captain Vorak faced scrutiny of his own. Upon returning to their homeworld, he and his crew were summoned before the Ayamtur Council of Elders, a group of high-ranking officials who governed the Zixarian Empire. The council chamber was vast and imposing, its walls lined with glowing crystals that pulsed faintly with light. Seated in elevated chairs, the elders stared down at Vorak and Rinks, their expressions unreadable. "Captain Vorak," one of the elders, began, his voice deep and resonant. "You led an expedition into uncharted territory and encountered an unknown species. Yet instead of eliminating the threat, you chose to negotiate. Explain yourself." Vorak stepped forward, his posture rigid, but respectful. "Elders, the humans proved themselves to be unlike any species we have encountered before. Their technology, while inferior in many ways, was effective against our defenses. More importantly, they demonstrated intelligence and adaptability. When, given the opportunity, they sought dialogue rather than continued violence. To destroy them outright would have been wasteful and potentially disastrous." The elder frowned, clearly displeased. "You allowed them to leave unharmed. What assurance do we have that they will not return with greater numbers and superior weapons?" Rink stepped forward, speaking calmly but firmly. "Elders, we established basic communication and agreed to avoid further conflict. While trust between our species is still fragile, we believe this encounter has opened a path toward mutual understanding. Humanity is not a primitive race. They are explorers, like us. Ignoring them or provoking them unnecessarily could lead to war. Is that truly what we desire?" The chamber fell silent as the elders considered her words. Finally, the lead elder spoke again. "Your actions were unconventional, Captain Vorak, but not without merit. However, you must understand the gravity of what you have done. By sparing humanity, you have introduced a new variable into the balance of power. If they grow stronger, they may become a rival, or worse, an enemy. It is now our responsibility to monitor them closely." Vorak bowed his head. "Yes, elders. I accept full responsibility for my decisions. Moving forward, I recommend establishing a dedicated team to study humanity and assess their potential threat level." The elder nodded. "Very well. Assemble such a team immediately. In the meantime, ensure that all ships patrolling our borders are equipped with enhanced detection systems. We cannot afford to be caught off guard again." As Vorak and Rinks left the chamber, Vorak felt a weight lift from his shoulders, but only slightly. He knew the Council's acceptance of his actions was conditional. If humanity ever posed a direct threat to the Zixarian Empire, there would be no room for negotiation. For now, though, they had bought themselves time, and perhaps a chance to coexist peacefully. Back on Earth, Rachel and her crew resumed their duties aboard the Pioneer Dawn, which had been fully repaired and refitted with upgraded systems. The ship felt different now, its corridors buzzing with renewed energy as the crew prepared for their next mission. This time, they weren't venturing into the unknown blindly. They carried with them the lessons learned from their encounter with the Zixarians. Lieutenant Commander Lucas Grant oversaw the installation of new defensive measures, including shield generators designed to counteract the type of energy weapons used by the aliens. Ensign Kyle Bennett worked tirelessly with linguists to refine the translation algorithms, creating a rudimentary database of Zixarian phrases and concepts. Even Daniel Harper joined in, collaborating with scientists to analyze the captured alien technology. One evening, as the crew gathered in the mess hall for dinner, Rachel stood up to address them. The room quieted as she spoke. "I know many of you are wondering what comes next. After what we've been through, it's natural to feel uncertain. But let me remind you of something important. We didn't just survive, we succeeded. We showed that humanity is capable of standing toe-to-toe with any species in the galaxy, and we proved that peace is possible, even in the face of conflict." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Our next mission will take us deeper into uncharted space. There may be more encounters like the one we had with the Zixarians, or there may be entirely new challenges waiting for us. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Because that's what we do. We explore, we learn, and we adapt." The crew erupted into applause, their spirits lifted by Rachel's words. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew they were ready for whatever lay beyond the stars. As the Pioneer Dawn departed Earth once more, its engines roaring to life, Rachel stood on the bridge, gazing out at the endless expanse of space. Somewhere out there, the Zixarians were watching, studying, preparing, and somewhere else other civilizations waited, their intentions unknown. Humanity's journey into the cosmos was just beginning, and Rachel knew it would be filled with both triumphs and trials. But she also knew one thing for certain. No matter what challenges arose, humanity would rise to meet them. With courage, determination, and an unwavering belief in the power of understanding, they would carve out their place among the stars.